Sales has fundamentally changed. The traditional sales model that has worked for centuries has been all about leads converting to wins. Here's our traditional sales funnel. We have our leads come in at the top and wins out the bottom. And this dotted line is where salespeople traditionally were paid. Now, as we take our leads down the sales funnel, we disqualify the customers that are not a good fit, or they can decide to remove themselves from the opportunity list. But this way of thinking does not work anymore. And there's a couple of fundamental reasons why. The first problem is this workflow was fine when the most of the money that the salesperson would make would be at the bottom of the sales funnel. But in today's world, we buy things differently thanks to software as a service, or SaaS. The internet now provides us with a lot of the value that previously salespeople provided. So let's turn this sales funnel on its side. Now the leads are still coming in the side, but the wins now happen in the middle instead of the bottom of the funnel. So what do you think happens when I draw out an expansion? Well, 72 to 93% of the lifetime value of your customer will only be realized after the initial transaction has been made. So we need to think about the customer's buying process much differently than before. Traditionally, before a customer would buy something, they'd need to have a problem. And we, as salespeople, are usually the ones to help educate them on how to solve their problem. As they get towards the end of the buying cycle, we help them select between competitors. Now, in this new model, we're going to break that down into 3 separate experiences. The first experience that the customer goes through is they need to be aware that they have a problem. They usually do this by reading things that marketing has sent them, or they stumble upon a problem and realize that there has to be a way to fix it. Now, in today's world, buyers think about solving problems by first going to the internet, specifically Google, where they're going to search how to blank. The second experience is the education phase, and this style is now something that customers are looking for with an expert. How do I blank? And now this is the role that we can help customers with while going through their buying journey. The final experience that the customer goes through is selection mode. Today more than ever, we have lots of competitors. Selection mode is how we help our customer go from the education phase all the way through to signing on the line that is dotted. Let's use a real world experience. When I got married, I was aware that I had a problem. I needed to buy a ring and I'd never bought one before. I didn't want to start off by speaking to a salesperson because I assumed the salesperson was just going to try to sell me something that was too expensive or didn't fit my needs. I expected that because I didn't have all the information, the salesperson was going to be able to take advantage of that. So where do you think I started my research? I went online, of course. And that's where I found out that there's a lot more to buying a ring than I ever knew. I learned about the 4 C's, about color and cut and carat, and all those elements that go into finding the right ring. I also found out that there were actually ways of buying a ring online. And that's when I had this aha moment. Now, this aha moment typically happens when the customer realizes that there is a solution to their problem. Now, in this case, I realized after educating myself online that I might have a better buying experience from an online retailer, somewhere I felt more comfortable because I could play around with 3D models and I had an unlimited variety of stones and materials to choose from compared to the brick and mortar stores that probably would not be able to offer me those things. So now with my education phase nearly complete, I was ready to move on to selection. Let me pause here for a moment And let's talk about the sales process in this phase. Now, up to this moment in the customer's experience, in a traditional sales process, this would be categorized as an MQL, a marketing qualified lead. Typically, this is the point where the customer is intrigued about learning about your business, but not ready to actually get into a sales cycle. That would be considered an SQL, or a sales qualified lead. Now, this would be typically characterized by a discovery call. This is when the customer is ready to jump on the phone with an expert for about 30 minutes to see if there's a good fit. If there's a good fit, the discovery call would be followed by a demo, proposal, negotiation, all the way through to closing the sale and beyond. Right now, let's go back to the role play and let's see how this experience journey actually aligns with the customer. So I realized I had educated myself. I'd figured out what type of ring, what shape, what size was in my budget. I was ready to buy, but because it was a big ticket item, it made sense for a salesperson to help me through the final stages. This selection mode is a really powerful opportunity for the sales professional not to come across as someone just trying to make their quota and make the sale, but instead somebody who's trying to educate their customer and help them get over the finish line with confidence. So in the end, I opted for the online purchase, partly because I had some friends who had bought engagement rings in store, and I didn't feel like having the experience that they had. So here's what happened next. I picked the ring that I wanted. I talked to someone on the phone just to make sure I was making the right choice and to understand the next steps. Now, every single time that you or your customer gets to that moment, right when you have signed or about to sign, you're filled with excitement, but this can also quickly turn into buyer's remorse. Right at the end, before or after payment has been made, this is when the seeds of churn are planted. Now, when we spoke earlier, I mentioned 72 to 93% of the lifetime value of your customer will only be realized after that first transaction is completed. So what can we do to optimize this continued growth? We'll focus more on this as the course progresses, but the long-term value of our customer is what should be in the crosshairs. Because this experience is so critical, we need to break it out. The first experience that our customer goes through right after commitment is called the onboarding flow. Now, onboarding ends when we have some sort of first value. This happens when the customer is committed, they're excited, and they can hold it in their hands for the first time. They can see a glimpse of how your solution is going to help. This is what we would call first value. It doesn't have to be that everything's implemented. What it means is the customer has the relief of knowing the search is over and that everything is going to be awesome. Now, with onboarding complete, it naturally leads into the impact phase. Impact is when your customer is using your solution and we can measure the results that the solution has provided. The impact to your customer is what keeps them engaged. In a reoccurring revenue business, they're going to want to keep coming back to us year over year over year, or even better, they provide us with additional growth opportunities. And this is why we have the expansion. We want to make sure that we can capitalize on all of this growth, and it's usually through upsell or cross-sell, renewal, or some sort of word of mouth. As sales professionals, we need to think about this whole process completely differently. Instead of the seller-centric, short-term thinking of just trying to get over the finish line, or even the negative old adage, always be closing, we are now completely converting that into a new model, one that we call the bow tie shape. There are some great things that we learned from old school selling processes, but we need to apply a new mindset. We need to focus on the customer first and provide them with an impact. The impact will carry them through to the end of the bow tie, and that's where the real value comes through. I'm looking forward to spending more time with you and to see how we can convert all of your customers into lifelong partners.